Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by, and welcome to the 'Tis the Season for Harassment Holiday Traditions Do's and Don'ts webinar. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. If you would like to ask a question during the presentation, please use the chat feature located in the lower left corner of your screen. And if you need to reach an operator at any time, please press *0. As a reminder, this conference is being recorded Thursday, November 17th, 2011. I would now like to turn the conference over to Mr. David Moore, Marketing Associate. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. This presentation is brought to you by Workplace Answers, and your presenter is Lynn Lieber, Esquire. Workplace Answers offers the most unique and compelling compliance training solution in the industry. We bring cutting-edge courseware and the latest training applications together with a dedicated professional services team to transform the way you educate your workforce. Today's presenter, Lynn Lieber, has been practicing employment law exclusively on the management side for nearly 25 years. She has conducted face-to-face employment law training sessions for hundreds of entities. She has also testified as an expert witness in unlawful harassment matters and frequently conducts remedial training for supervisors or executives who have been accused of harassment or discrimination. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. You can submit your questions to the speaker at any time today by typing them through the chat feature located on the lower left side of your screen. All questions will be answered as time permits at the end of the call. As a reminder, today's webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link to this recording tomorrow morning. Unfortunately, we will not be able to provide the actual PowerPoint slides, but as I mentioned, all attendees will receive an email with a link to view this recording, as well as a white paper with key takeaways from today's webinar. I invite you all to continue this conversation on Twitter using the hashtag #WPAHoliday. We'll be conducting a few polling questions during the presentation. Just click the radial buttons to select your answer, and we'll show the results once they are in. I'd now like to turn the call over to your presenter, Lynn Lieber. Go ahead, Lynn.
Hi, thank you all, and thank you so much for your introduction, David. I'm happy to have all of you here. We have, I think over 1,100 people signed up for this webinar, so this is obviously something very much on HR's screen at this time with the holidays approaching, our traditional holidays. I would like to really not make this a standard webinar where we talk about parties and alcohol. We will cover those issues, but I want to really make this focused a little broader on respect and inclusion of how holidays work and operate in the workplace. So we will talk about liability and tips, but I do want to talk about more than just the quote-unquote December dilemma, which is Thanksgiving and then Hanukkah and Christmas, and how we have holidays around this time of year, and office parties and things like that. Workplace Answers, I will note, does have not only legal courses in discrimination and unlawful harassment that covers many of the issues that we'll talk about today, but Workplace Answers is the only online training company that has a full suite of diversity courses. And one of the courses that I strongly urge you to take a look at is Honoring Holiday Traditions, because that will cover some of the issues that we're going to be discussing today. I'm sure many of you have heard of the holiday Festivus, which was from the popular sitcom Seinfeld. And this was a holiday episode that focused on the quote-unquote holiday celebrated by George and his family called Festivus. And it was really intended as a holiday, as an alternative for people who didn't have something else to celebrate. And in the show, Festivus involved rituals, elaborate rituals, and was fodder for a lot of entertainment. But in real life, there are actually many people who don't celebrate holidays and may feel left out of holiday celebrations in the workplace. From traditional religious holidays to neo-pagan celebrations to simply not celebrating holidays at all, people commemorate important events, both religious and cultural, in many different ways. And a workplace culture that is attuned to the possible holiday needs of employees, instead of relying on blanket policies, which tend to be non-inclusive, will be better equipped to handle issues arising from holidays in the workplace. So I'm going to start you out with a polling question, and that is, has your organization ever received post-party complaints regarding organization-sponsored holiday actions or behaviors? And we're getting lots of responses. Oh, tons of people coming in with issues. And I'll jump to results in just a second. I'll wait 1 second till we hit a big number. And one of the things I'd like to do in this webinar is give you time at the end to ask questions, but also to share your best practices of what you have done in the workplace that has worked regarding holidays. So I will now show you the results. They're still coming in, but a good number of you, 44%, have received post-party complaints after an organization-sponsored party. And that, I think, is a huge number. That's nearly half. And luckily for you, 55% haven't received any issues. But I think this does bring up a lot of legal issues, but also I think cultural issues and religious issues are now very much at the forefront. So we're going to move on to kind of religion in the workplace and what we're going to discuss today, which are both legal issues, as I said, and issues of inclusion and respect. The law defines religion as including non-traditional religions held with the same strength as their traditional counterparts. So all those things are protected, meaning that harassment or discrimination based on religion is illegal. So for example, even if I choose to celebrate the holiday, since my last name is Lieber, of liberosity, and I hold those beliefs with the same strength as a traditional Christian belief, Jewish belief, Hindu belief, Buddhist belief, my religion would be protected in the workplace. And we'll talk more about how religious issues impact the workplace. But I want to go a little bit further and talk really about how an inclusive workplace goes further than just adhering to unlawful harassment and discrimination laws regarding religion, and how religion is really, as I said, more than the December dilemma. There are religious holidays that people celebrate in the spring, in the summer, in the fall, and in the winter. And I think as HR professionals, these are things that you really need to be attuned to. And as I said earlier, I think blanket policies regarding religious celebrations, time off, maybe don't serve the employer in the best possible way. One of the things I strongly advocate are paid time off policies, where you can use your paid time off for various reasons, whether it be to take time off because your child is sick, or you want a vacation day, or you need a mental health day, or you need to celebrate a religious holiday. And really inclusive workplaces are environments where diverse perspectives are not only tolerated, but where they're celebrated. And we, obviously we've talked before in different webinars about how important that is. But in terms of workplace holiday celebrations, there are many employees that do not celebrate holidays at all. For example, I have worked with different employees who are Jehovah's Witnesses, and they simply do not celebrate any holidays. They don't celebrate birthdays. They don't celebrate Christmas. And that can leave the employer in a bit of a quandary. And the woman that we had in one of my workplaces who was a Jehovah's Witness made it clear that she did not celebrate holidays, but we always felt a little awkward about, should we let her know that we're having a birthday party celebration in the conference room? Should we not? And she was very accepting and understanding of it, that, thank you for inviting me, but I don't do that. And she actually, when we had the holiday party at the end of the year, she did not attend that. She didn't have any family member attend that. And I think she looked at us as kind of silly for having to buy all these presents at this time and being under so much pressure. But this illustrates the point that I think many people might feel left out of certain workplace celebrations, especially if they are religious-based or even secular-based. And it's important to know that people commemorate events, important events, in many different ways. So part of, I think, being an employer of best practices and respect and inclusion is to be attuned to the possible holiday needs of employees, again, instead of relying on these non-inclusive blanket policies. So what I want to do briefly is kind of elucidate what we're talking about by telling you about holidays by the season. So I'm going to send out, David is going to send out an email white paper that will include some of these, but I think some of these holidays are important for HR to know, and I have to say that some of these I was not familiar with myself. So there are neo-pagan holidays, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with paganism, it's an umbrella term that really refers to a variety of religious movements, and pagan beliefs are traditionally of a pre-modern Europe nature. And in paganism, in neo-paganism, there are sometimes eight seasonal festivals called the Wheel of the Year, and paganism is sometimes categorized as polytheism, which can be a belief in one or more god or goddesses. So there are various holidays regarding neo-paganism and paganism. Similarly, Buddha Day is Buddhist. Easter is obviously a Christian holiday along with Lent. Sangha is a Buddhist holiday. Many of us are familiar with Passover being a Jewish holiday. Pentecost is a Christian holiday. Shavuot, there are other Jewish holidays. And then neo-paganism and Wiccan religious, they celebrate spring equinox as well as other similar holidays. And again, I will send out some more information to you detailing more about what these holidays are about, just from an HR perspective, in case someone comes and asks you if they can have time off for a certain holiday. And remember that many holidays do not last simply one day. They go on. For example, Lent goes on for a long period of time, a period of weeks, and the high holidays in Jewish religion can last for a period of time. There are also some major summer holidays: Buddhist holidays, Muslim holidays, Hindu holidays, neo-pagan holidays, Ramadan, a Muslim holiday, and summer solstice, which is celebrated as a neo-pagan and Wiccan holiday. And again, I will provide you with more information. I don't want you to have to be writing all these down as we go through this. And then we get into some of the major fall holidays. And these are ones that we're more familiar with, which can be All Saints' Days, All Hallows, Hallowmas. This is a Christian holiday. Again, in neo-paganism and the Wiccan religion, there is an autumn equinox. There are Sikh holidays, Mexican holidays, Hindu and Sikh Festival of Lights, other Hindu holidays, Muslim holidays, the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah, which coincidentally I always find interesting. I was raised Catholic and my husband was raised Jewish, And so I know personally about both of those holidays. And I think some employers try to raise Hanukkah to the same level as Christmas. And they're really very different holidays. Hanukkah celebrates something completely different and really is not of the same stature in the Jewish tradition as Christmas is in the Christian religion. So the two don't really equate. We also have Ramadan, a Muslim holiday, Rosh Hashanah, a Jewish holiday, and again, Samhain, which is a neo-pagan holiday. And finally, our winter holidays, which again are different based on religion. Boxing Day is a major holiday in the UK, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, among other countries. Obviously, Christmas is a Christian holiday. There are Muslim holidays. Epiphany is another Christian holiday. We've talked about Hanukkah as a Jewish holiday. Also, neo-pagan holidays at this time of year. Kwanzaa is an African American holiday, and neo-pagans and Wiccans celebrate winter solstice or Yule. So there are many holidays that you might get asked about during the year as an HR professional, and I think it's important to have some perspective that holidays aren't just typically what we believe in as the traditionally recognized holidays. So organizations that accept and embrace all different types of holidays and respect people's beliefs in those areas are really seen as organizations of more respect and inclusion. There's also a global perspective to holidays, and that involves timing of holidays. Some holidays do not fall on the same date each year. Like I know Greek Orthodox Easter is a fluctuating holiday. And holidays often do not fall on a specific date every year and don't follow our typical Gregorian calendar. So some faiths follow religious calendars, others are determined by lunar calendars, and others fall on a particular amount of time after a previous movable holiday. So even the same or similar holidays can be celebrated on different dates and in different ways from country to country. So when we get into this issue of holidays, it gets to be quite complex. For example, the spring and autumn equinoxes, which are celebrated by several different neo-pagan groups, will be at opposite times depending on the side of the equator where the celebrator lives. And All Saints' Day is another example. It's a Christian holiday that is celebrated on different dates by Eastern and Western Christians. One is a movable date and the other is not. And if you've been watching TV lately, you might have seen some people in the UK wearing red poppies on their lapels. That is a ritual and tradition throughout the UK, Canada, and South Africa, commemorating Remembrance Day and the 2 weeks leading up to it. So many people wear poppies on their lapels to commemorate veteran sacrifices and those who have served in the armed services. And the poppy was chosen because of a poem, In Flanders Fields, written by John McCrae. And in his poem he talked about how the poppies bloomed in some of the battlefields during World War I. So let's give you a polling question number 2. We talked about Beltane, which is a neo-pagan holiday. So here is the factual scenario. Hannah has a day planner that she brings to work that displays the holidays she celebrates, including Beltane. When her coworker Mark sees certain pictures, he tells her he's offended. Hannah explains to him that the pictures refer to Beltane, a religious celebration of fertility. So the question for you all is, should Hannah be required to use a different planner at work? And the possible responses are yes, it is offensive to Mark. No, it depicts a religious holiday. Yes, religious items aren't allowed at work. And no, faith-related items are okay. going to get a critical mass. This is a big issue as to what can be displayed of a religious nature in the workplace. And there are many cases that are quite interesting. And this is one of the areas where we have the right to express our religion in the workplace, but that right only extends as far as it might offend or create a hostile working environment for someone else. So I'm going to skip to the results because we have hundreds of people responding. So most of you said that Hannah should be required to use a different planner at work because it is offensive to Mark. Many of you said no, that faith-related items are okay. The answer really is that unless the planner contains material that is inappropriate for the workplace, such as sexually explicit drawings, Hannah may be able to use it at work. And part of an inclusive workplace culture involves allowing employees to bring their religious identity to work. Now, there are limits to this, so Hannah may not have the ability to try to convert others to her faith at work, but she is allowed to bring her neo-pagan themed planner and similar items with her to work. So I think it's interesting that most of you responded that she could not bring it because it was offensive to Mark, where really employers need to be very attuned to religious items in the workplace, and it's not always clear-cut. For example, can you bring a Bible to work? Is that appropriate to have in your cubicle or in your office a Bible or a copy of the Koran or another religious document or as a day planner or a calendar? And I think this comes down to, as attorneys like to say, really the gray areas. It depends on whether that would be offensive to someone. So for example, if Hannah's day planner had very graphic sexual images because Beltane celebrates fertility, well, yes, that might be something that's offensive to one of her coworkers. But if it is a simple day planner that has something related to the holiday and fertility that is not sexually explicit, she is likely to be able to exercise her religious freedom and have that. Similarly, an employee who has a Bible in the workplace might be able to have that there if the employer allows other reading materials, so long as the employee does not read that during working hours or does not proselytize or read passages of it to other employees. There are also several other cases that are rather interesting about religion in the workplace and an expression of your religious beliefs. One of them is a case where a woman believed that abortion was a mortal sin, and she requested her employer that she wear a full-color button of an aborted fetus. And the employer actually tried to accommodate her by saying, well, you can't wear that while you're walking around in the workplace, but we will allow you to wear that within your cubicle. And she said, no, my religious beliefs are that I need to proselytize that abortion is a mortal sin, and part of what I believe is that people need to know that, and I need to convey that message. And in that case, it actually went to court, and the court said no, that the offensive nature of her religious expression outweighed her right to express her religious freedom in the workplace. Similarly, there was a case at Hewlett-Packard a couple years ago where the employer HR had a diversity initiative, and part of that involved showing the flag that depicts homosexuality, gay and lesbian employees, and it was I think there was like a month of inclusiveness and education about the gay and lesbian, the LGBT culture. And an employee who had a cubicle was very anti-gay and lesbian, and he posted on his cubicle where everyone could see it large prints of Bible verses condemning homosexuality. And he was told in that case, again that went to trial, that he could not post those, that his right to express his religious beliefs about homosexuality were not permissible in the workplace, and they were in fact offensive to other people. So there are not only religious holidays, but we have what we really refer to as cultural holidays. And some of you might be surprised that these can actually be offensive to different people who maybe for religious reasons or cultural reasons find such holidays offensive. One of those is Halloween. Many organizations have the Halloween party or some sort of gathering or dress up or celebrate that in some way. And I think HR people need to be attuned that not everyone celebrates Halloween. It's generally viewed as a secular holiday, although its origins are from pagan celebrations called the Festival of the Dead, and some Christians do not celebrate the holiday because of either its pagan origins or its closeness to All Saints' Day. Additionally, some neo-pagans, including some Wiccans, feel that the holiday casts a negative light on their beliefs. So this, obviously, many people respond to things like this by saying, well, how PC and politically correct do we need to be? Can't we have some freedom in the workplace? And I think we definitely can, but what we're striving for is to really respect and honor everyone and their beliefs. And if someone is offended by that, I think HR needs to deal with that in a very sensitive way. And another interesting cultural holiday that can be offensive to some people is Thanksgiving. At a company I worked at, we had a dilemma about should we send holiday cards out to our customers. And there was a lot of discussion about that and what should the cards look like. Should they be New Year's cards? Should they be cards that are blue and white so they don't look like Christmas cards, but then do they look like Hanukkah cards? So we were really struggling with that, and someone said, well, why don't we just send out Thanksgiving cards, because everyone believes in Thanksgiving, and it might be a nice way to say we're grateful to all of our customers for the work we've done together this year. However, I myself was surprised to know that for some people, Thanksgiving is not considered a time of celebration, and that some Native Americans view it as a time of mourning and even call it the day of mourning. So by throwing an office party with a Thanksgiving theme, an organization may not be inclusive to all members of society and everyone in the workplace. So really what we think is a better choice is that an organization might throw an office party that doesn't revolve around a certain holiday. So maybe you have an end-of-year celebration that focuses on the work the team has conducted that year. Even New Year's Eve, and like sending out a New Year's Eve card, could be offensive to certain religions or people who have different sets of beliefs, because not everyone follows the Gregorian calendar. Some people follow the lunar calendar. So again, we don't want to go overboard with this, but I think these are interesting things that HR needs to be attuned to really create an inclusive workplace. Now we'll talk about limiting holiday party liability. And as you started out the webinar by your responses, 44% of you on the phone have had problems and complaints about the holiday party, and I bet many of these could fall into the category of legal complaints. So I think we really start with the invitation. Maybe you have an end-of-year type party, or a party to commemorate the work that your team has done, really having a neutral time or using a neutral term to gather employees for a celebration. It could also be a celebration regarding launching of a new product or something that is tied rather to your business than to any specific holiday that is celebrated. So these really should be non-holiday related invitations. So no Santas, no Stars of David, typically no Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. These would be invitations that are neutral, that not only invite employees, but might invite quote-unquote partners instead of spouses. And truly inclusive organizations think about extending an invitation to an employee's friend, a family member, or their children. And I always think it's very nice and appropriate for someone at the organization, the CEO or a high-level executive of the organization, to thank the families, partners, even friends of the employees for their support of the organization by supporting their family member or their partner. And I think it's also, this is an area where we get into a lot of situations with the LGBT community. So I think it's also important, as we said, to create an invitation that makes it clear to gay and lesbian employees that their mate or date is welcome at the party. So instead of using the word guest, you could drive home this point by using the term domestic partner or preferred guest. That would be advance notice to employees and guests that it is a gay and lesbian friendly party, allowing anyone who is uncomfortable to prepare themselves or decline the invitation. And I think truly diverse organizations really lead by example. So for employees to believe that a company really accepts the gay and lesbian population, senior partners and leaders must carry out the company's or the organization's commitment themselves by bringing their own partners or significant others to holiday parties. I think it's still very common that employees are uncomfortable bringing their partner, if they're gay or lesbian, to a holiday party. And I think the best way to remedy that is by the top levels of the company feeling comfortable, which again allows lower ranking employees to also feel comfortable. And one statistic that I recently saw is the #1 reason why lesbian women stay at organizations is not because they believe that they will get promotions, or it's not because of pay. It is because they see other lesbian women high-ranking in the organization, and it gives them hope that they too could advance in the organization, and the organization is not discriminatory. And I think also being tolerant of a same-sex couple is very important. So whether it's dancing or kissing, same-sex couples shouldn't receive higher scrutiny or any different comments or statements made regarding their behavior. Now, of course, if a behavior is inappropriate by all standards, a member of senior management should politely request that the couple behave in good taste. But we really, it's not inappropriate if there is dancing between couples going on for same-sex couples to engage in dancing as well. Now we get into alcohol, which is a big issue at a lot of holiday parties. I'm sure most of you have regretted serving alcohol at certain parties because people tend to overindulge. I think a way we'll talk a little bit about the legalities and whether employers can be liable for serving alcohol at holiday parties. But I think one of the key things I'd like you to get from this webinar today is that if you are going to have a holiday party, it's really a good idea to send a memo out to all your employees and supervisors beforehand, reminding them of various things, that this is an employer-sponsored event, that the drug and alcohol policy applies at the event, that the unlawful harassment policy applies at the event, and that any code of conduct regarding personal conduct and how you professionally present yourself applies at the event. So obviously your alcohol and drug policy should indicate that alcohol is not allowed in the workplace except at employer-sponsored events, and that when alcohol is served, employees are expected to maintain their composure, avoid intoxication, and act responsibly. And again, the best way I think to do that is to send a memo to each employee reiterating the terms of these various, at least 3 or 4 policies, and make it very clear that this is a professional workplace event. This doesn't mean that it's time to break out the lowest cut dress that you have or a very revealing unbuttoned shirt for a man to wear, that this is a professional event, and even though the dress might be quote unquote festive, it needs to be workplace appropriate. So how to limit alcohol-related liability? In the state of California generally, employers are not criminally responsible for allowing an intoxicated employee to drive home, and I'll get into that in the next slide. But I think there are different ways to limit alcohol-related liabilities. And the first one is to just not serve alcohol, to arrange for the celebration to be a brunch or a luncheon where alcohol isn't served. If you do choose to serve alcohol, it's very important to arrange to have alternative transportation. That might mean free cabs. That might mean designated drivers. It might mean a bus that picks people up and drives them to and from the party. It can also be helpful to use a cash bar or tickets that limit the number of drinks that each employee is entitled to. Some employers serve a limited amount of beer and wine instead of hard liquor. It's also very helpful to serve starchy and high-protein foods, which helps slow the absorption of alcohol, and have those served at the same time as alcohol. And then it's important for servers and bartenders to know, and the employer or HR person should tell them that they can refuse service to anyone who appears to be intoxicated. And for HR people, and really all supervisors, a holiday party is really a working event. This is not a time for high-level or really any supervisors to kick up their heels and get outrageous. They are still acting in a supervisory capacity or in an HR capacity at this event. So harassment and discrimination. As you said, 44% of you have had complaints, and I'm sure a lot of these dealt with situations of harassment and discrimination in the workplace. I've had them in workplaces where I've worked. I had an employee complain to me because 2 male employees were joking about whether one of them was going to bring a quote-unquote hottie to the holiday party, and brought in a Barbie doll that sat on the employee's desk saying, well, here's who you should bring as your date. An employee filed a complaint over that. And I've actually had to stand up as a member of senior management in an organization when the holiday gift-giving presentation was happening and people started making jokes about Viagra and sexual-related things. I had to stand up in front of the group and say, this is a work-related event. Talk of a sexual nature can be offensive to some people, and we can't have it. That might seem like a wet blanket thing to do, but it goes a long way towards avoiding any liability you might have for harassment or discrimination. So again, this should be something that is included in a memo that's given to all employees. I would say unlawful harassment, definitely. And that covers not only employees but third parties, which mean party guests. So I think it's important for employees to remember that party guests can harass them and that they too can unlawfully harass a guest at the party. So all these things apply at all company-related functions, and I think it's very important for employees to know that whether you are at the end of your party, whether you're at a client dinner, whether you're at a trade show, these policies apply anytime you are engaged in business for your employer wherever it is. And one final note is about the quote-unquote after party, which there always seems to be. And I've handled a lot of cases where the after party seems to surround a hot tub and what happened in that hot tub. So I think it is critically important for supervisors to hold professional boundaries when it comes to holiday parties, to not attend an after party. And there are really good legal reasons for this. If there are two employees where one of them claims they were sexually harassed by another at the after party, the employer typically is not liable for that if it happened or if there was consensual behavior between two employees, if it happened completely away from the workplace and was not really connected to a work event. It didn't happen at a work event. However, the standards are different with supervisors. Supervisors hold what the law says is like an aura of power because they have the right to make decisions about employees' terms and conditions of employment. So a supervisor in the hot tub harassing an employee, even if it's completely away from the workplace, not connected to a work event, could still be liable for unlawful harassment. And I think it's also important, at least in the state of California and other states, to let all employees know in this memo that you send that they can be personally liable for engaging in acts of unlawful harassment, which means it's not just the organization trying to do a CYA memo. This means that if they behave inappropriately or sexually harass someone, they can be personally liable, which means they can have a jury verdict assessed against them. They can have their wages garnished. They can have to give over their house, their child's education. Personal liability extends. So really it's to protect employees as well as to protect the employer. One issue that I wanted to raise that I think is quite provocative right now is social media and holiday parties, and whether it is okay or what an employer can do to the plethora of pictures that are going to be posted on the Internet that were taken at the holiday party where employees tag each other. Now, this comes down to an interesting issue legally because the National Labor Relations Board has jumped into the fray big time in this area. And it has dictated rules, Section 7, which is your right to engage in protected concerted activity. And this means that a policy where you say employees can't post anything about the workplace on YouTube, on Facebook, on a blog, and that policy is overbroad because employees are allowed to complain about their terms or conditions of employment or discuss them on the Internet. That is protected Section 7 behavior. Now, whether that extends to tagging a photo of someone who is in a compromising position or is obviously intoxicated is another matter. I do think what's appropriate in a memo that you send out is to remind employees that any postings might lead them towards personal liability. So it might make them think twice about it. Whether you can say you are not allowed to post holiday parties on Facebook or tag other employees, I think is really probably not legally appropriate at this time. We also have workers' comp liability at holiday parties. And this is especially true if attendance at an office party is a reasonable expectancy of or expressly or impliedly required by the employer In cases like that, an employer may be subject to workers' compensation liability for any employees who suffered injuries. And in addition, an employer can be held liable for injuries to third parties caused by intoxicated employees. This comes from California Labor Code Section 3600, where employees have attempted to sue their employer for slip and fall type situations, but the employer is generally not responsible when the employee's participation is voluntary, so off-duty social activity that is not part of an employer's duties. However, if the employee is using the employer's car, is still on employer property, if the employee is performing job services for the employer, there still could be workers' comp liability. And now I know you're all waiting to hear about whether employees are criminally or civilly liable for the acts of intoxicated employees. Under the laws of many states, if an obviously intoxicated employee is served additional drinks at an employer-sponsored party, the organization can be criminally liable. These are often referred to as dram shop laws or quote-unquote social host laws. And civil penalties may also be assessed to the employer or its agent who serves alcohol to a minor or to someone with a known disability who's then injured. In California, we generally don't have criminal liability if an employee is intoxicated at an employer-sponsored event and injures themselves or someone else. However, some local California governments do have social host ordinances. Obviously, the best thing to do here is to have monitors, have HR or other supervisors monitor what's happening, monitor any employees that are intoxicated, and make sure that they do not receive additional alcohol. Okay, another polling question. Does your organization send pre-party memos to employees on appropriate party behavior at employer-sponsored events? Lots of things coming in here. Interesting results. Well, I am very surprised by these results. They're still coming in, but I'm going to skip to the results. And hundreds and hundreds of responses, and here's what we have. 85% of employers do not send out a pre-party memo to employees on appropriate party behavior. And I think it's very important to do so. I think it can help limit your liability, limit punitive damages in a sexual harassment or other type of harassment lawsuit. And remember, with third-party harassment, the standards are very broad. So someone who is a guest can bring a lawsuit for something like this. So I think it's really important that all employees and supervisors not only maybe receive a memo, but receive unlawful harassment, discrimination, and potentially respect and inclusion training prior to the event that is occurring. So how do we stop inappropriate behavior? As a senior executive, it's not always comfortable to, in the middle of the party, be the wet blanket and say, we have to stop behavior like that. But I think it is highly important to address inappropriate situations immediately. And these are any situations which you think are inappropriate. This can include intoxication. It can include comments, jokes, touching, statements. And it can even include inappropriate dress, not only of the employee, but also of the employee's guest. So if you have a guest who's attended as a partner of one of your employees or a friend, and that person is dressed very inappropriately, it is definitely advisable for you to ask that person to wear a shawl, to cover up, or to talk to your employee about how that is inappropriate. Everyone's talking about it. People are taking photos and making comments about it. So as a guest, I think it is appropriate. And this relates to any comments or actions in front of or made to third-party guests as well. So I think all supervisors are responsible for two major things. First is not engaging in any inappropriate behavior themselves. Obviously, supervisors can be personally liable, as can all employees, but supervisors are really held to a higher standard under the law, really the standard of a role model, and that every supervisor has a legal responsibility to stop any inappropriate behavior they witness. And as we said, supervisors should not attend after parties. They need to hold professional boundaries with employees. They should not be in the position where they are friends of employees. They really need to hold different boundaries, and the most lawsuits I see are where professional boundaries break down and a supervisor confides too much in an employee or listens too much to an employee's problems or issues. So professional boundaries, I think, are huge, and professional boundary violation is probably the #1 reason why we have lawsuits in the workplace. So now let's talk just briefly before we finish up about some religious-related needs or restrictions. And a big one of these is dietary restrictions. Many religions require fasting at different times of the year. There are Hindu holidays which involve fasting. Ramadan, a Muslim holiday, involves fasting, as does Lent, Passover, and Yom Kippur. And this can get into a tricky situation because what if you have just a work-related lunch where it's during Ramadan and an employee is fasting? It's not appropriate to make comments about an employee's food choices or to tease them about it, or even if they are, like, they don't eat milk, if they're Jewish and they don't eat dairy-related products with meat-related products, and all the employer is serving is ham and cheese sandwiches. Well, we need to be inclusive of all different types of people and serve different types of meals. One area where this can come up too is at dinner with a client or something with a customer, some event or a trade show. And it's important to realize and be respectful of employees who might be fasting or who might have different dietary restrictions. A big one of these too, I think, is regarding alcohol. Employees seem very free to make comments about their coworkers who do not drink alcohol. And there are many reasons why people do not drink alcohol. Some of those are religious reasons. So making jokes or comments about someone being a teetotaler, for example, can be, if it's extreme and severe or pervasive, could be religious discrimination. Similarly with dietary restrictions and religion, some people might be on a diet. Some people might not be drinking alcohol because of pregnancy or related conditions, because of disabilities, or because they're alcoholics. And all those things are protected by law. So I've had quite a few cases where this issue has come up, and these are tied to protected categories quite often. So I think any comments about employees not drinking alcohol or jokes about that are very inappropriate in the workplace. So David, I will hand it over to you to talk a little bit about some of Workplace Answers offerings in these very interesting areas.
Well, thanks, Lynn. Yeah, we do offer a course on honoring holiday traditions that addresses many of the issues presented here today. And online training really is a great way to spread the knowledge throughout the company. So it's not just HR that's aware of these potential problems. As part of the presentation, I thought I'd give you guys a sneak peek at this course, our Honoring Holiday Traditions course. Just a couple of slides here. For example, we had started off with the Festivus example. The course does try to remain relevant and speak to the people to not make it so dry and kind of scary, but entertain as well with cultural references. Another way that we try to keep it entertaining and interesting and the learner involved is through the use of situational stories, story-based learning, and then questions as they go through it. So it's not just reading stuff. And this is an example that we talked a little bit about on is company cards. And a company that sends out Christmas cards to some folks and Hanukkah cards to the other. And the problems that could come up by doing that, even if you are trying to be sensitive and trying to do the right thing, and how that happens. Now this Honoring Holiday Traditions course is part of a larger diversity suite that we offer. And Workplace Answers works with organizations that are uncertain how to protect their company from employment lawsuits, as well as HR professionals that are just frustrated with the workload when training their employees, especially large organizations. So we do offer over 40 online courses that cover these important areas like discrimination, diversity inclusion, workforce management, and many more, as you can see by our course catalog here. All these courses are hosted and supported by our Slate Learning Management System, which allows you to track your training process in real time. You can add new learners with the click of a button, and also send automated reminder emails to make sure people are taking their training and completing it. And this is all implemented without the support of IT or any other complicated integrations. It's just kind of a plug-and-play type of deal. So with that, we'll get to some of these questions that we had because we've got a lot. But first, if you would like to have somebody contact you right away to see a demo of either the holiday traditions or perhaps some of the diversity and awareness courses, go ahead and click here, and we'll make sure to have somebody contact you either by the end of this week or early next week. So let's get to some of the questions. And we've had several people ask, Lynn, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit more about the memo that you would send out and maybe just kind of what you would include in something like that. Just go over that one more time real quick.
Certainly, I'd be happy to. And I think it's something, obviously, as we've seen, that companies don't do but really need to. It's a great way to avoid liability, to show that whatever happened wasn't on the company. We did our best to avoid things from happening. But I think it can be a very short memo. I think it merely needs to remind employees that we're having a holiday party, and remember that the unlawful harassment policy, the drug and alcohol policy, the code of conduct policy about personal behavior all apply at this party, as well as at all other employer events, trade shows, dinners, things like that, and that people should remember that they need to dress appropriately, and this is really a workplace working event, not just a party. So what I think I would do is have it come from maybe HR just as a reminder, but I think referencing those policies can be very helpful, even maybe attaching them to the memo so employees know, like if they get harassed, we can say, well, I attached the memo. The employee knew how to report these claims of harassment, and they didn't do so.
Great. Thank you. There were also other questions about the liability at a party. If they're having a party and it's at a restaurant and it's the restaurant's bartenders, and they've talked to them and said you're responsible for monitoring the alcohol intake, is the company still liable if that restaurant overserves and they make that clear?
Well, I'm sure any creative plaintiff's attorney would sue both the employer and the restaurant. Vendors of alcohol that overserve people who are obviously intoxicated do fall under that dram shop rule or the quote-unquote social host liability. So they can be more liable than employers can. But I don't think you're going to be able to pass off your liability and say, well, it's not our fault, the bartenders kept serving. You as HR people and managers really need to be attuned to that, and if someone is intoxicated, get them out of the party and make sure they have a safe ride home. Don't obviously let them drive home alone if you know that's what they're going to do, or have them stay somewhere in the city. But I think all of it is, again, these are working events. These might be parties and might be times of celebration, but for managers, they're working events.
Great. A lot of people have also asked about the definition of religion, and how far that extends. As you talked earlier in the presentation a little bit about it. And for example, I love to water ski. I really love it. Could I consider that a religion and say, you know what, I have to be there at 9 a.m. Or I can't come in till 10 because my water skiing is my religion. How far does this extend? Where's that line drawn?
Well, the religious discrimination laws are very broad. So if it is something that if it is a belief that you hold with the strength of traditional religious beliefs, then it is something that's covered. And the courts have gotten broader and broader on what a religion is. Now, this webinar, we obviously didn't cover like how to accommodate different religious requests. But I think yes, it could be a religion based on how the employee practices it. You could make up your own religion and practice it. So I think the definition of religion is very, very broad, and it's something that many employers are not comfortable with. Many coworkers aren't comfortable with. Like I've had quite a few situations with Wiccan employees who display things on their desks, or employees say, well, now we have devil worshipers or witches in our workplace. Any comments related to those need to be eliminated from the workplace. Religion is one of our primary protected categories from Title VII of 1964, so it's been around forever. So I think there's a fine line between that, and that's where HR is going to have to make determinations and consult with legal counsel.
Great. Yeah, it sounds like it's a bit of a gray area, and we could probably do a whole series of webinars just on that.
Yes, and that's why blanket policies really don't apply in this area, because a policy regarding religious celebrations might on its face look neutral, but it might impact people of different religions differently, which is called disparate impact and is a form of discrimination. So I think, unfortunately, these are situations that HR has to take sort of on a case-by-case basis and make determinations about, hopefully in conjunction with legal counsel.
Yeah. We have a question about the distinction between liability for private employers versus a public employer. And, if you send out certificates for like a Butterball turkey around Thanksgiving and you're a private company, is that going to be less liability, or is that even a problem?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Is it okay? Well, one of the big issues.
Well, more. Let's just focus, I think, more on the private versus public.
Okay.
Is one held to a higher standard than the other?
Well, they're both held to high standards. We all have seen employees that have sued public entities. There are maybe different limits on punitive damages and things. But one area where I think there is a lot of difference is with gift giving, because in private employment you might be able to send out gifts to your customers, the holiday baskets and things, whereas public entities might not be able to receive those because they might be tainted. That might influence their neutral selection of a vendor. So I think there are some subtle differences between public and private in these situations.
Okay. Well, we are running a little over time, so I'll just do two more questions if that's okay, Lynn. Does that work for you?
Yes.
Great. Well, one of them is giving time off versus business requirements. For example, if at a kitchen, if you have a Muslim cook that wants to pray at 1 p.m. right in the middle of the lunch rush, making accommodations to things like this that it almost goes against the job requirements, or many employers feel like that's a basic requirement, and I need you right then. How do you handle situations like that?
That gets into the whole area that we really didn't cover in this, which is on religious accommodation. I think one of the best ways to handle a situation like that is to have a very clearly worded job description about what the essential functions of the job are and when the employee needs to be there. And there are some essential functions that cannot be reasonably accommodated, whether those are functions related to a disability, related to religion, related to how much someone can lift. So I think the best thing is to start with the job description, and obviously if, like let's say you have a need for a receptionist who needs to arrive at 8 a.m. and you have an employee that says, well, I need to pray at 8 a.m. That's a requirement of my religion. I think that might not be something that the employer needs to accommodate because it might cause them an undue hardship, and it's clearly stated in the job description that that is an essential function of the job.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. If anybody has questions on that job description, we do have a white paper specifically on that. You can access from the homepage of our website. There's a white papers link. Just click on that, and it'll take you to the area where you can download that for free.
Great.
The final question that I'm going to ask you, Lynn, is to just go over one more time a little bit about the social media and the tagging, and just kind of recap that one more time. We've had several people that I know that's a big worry right now of how to handle that.
It's a huge issue. And it's been very interesting that the National Labor Relations Board has gotten into this with the aggressiveness that they have. And it's not only union employers. These laws, Section 7 laws, relate to all employers. And Section 7, again, is the employee's ability to talk about their terms and conditions of employment, and that can be on the Internet. And employers whose policies are overbroad have been found to be inappropriate by the NLRB. So it's called protected concerted activity in Section 7. So that can mean I can get on a blog and I can complain about my supervisor, and if another employee complains about the same supervisor, or that we don't get holidays off, or that our pay is bad, or anything related to terms and conditions, the employee is allowed to do that because that is called protected concerted activity. That takes more than one employee. That takes two employees. The posting pictures on Facebook or videos on YouTube is something a little different. And that is something that I don't think you can necessarily say your employees can't do, because they do have a right of freedom of expression. However, I think the way to get around it would be to suggest perhaps in your memo that taking pictures like that might create legal liability for themselves or complaints against them, or they might want to ask the coworkers permission before they tag them in a photo or before they post the photo to begin with. But that is a very interesting and emerging area, and we don't have a lot of clear answers yet.
Great. Well, thank you, Lynn. I appreciate your time today. This has been very educational, and we really appreciate it. I also want to thank everybody for joining us today. Remind everybody that I will be sending out an email tomorrow morning. It's going to have a link where you can view the recording of this webinar. Please feel free to share that link. We'll also have a little white paper with some key takeaways that you can download. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to provide the actual PowerPoint slides from today's presentation, but the key takeaways and recording will be available on demand at any time that you would like to view them. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you very much. Thank everyone for attending.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude the conference call for today. We thank you for your participation and ask that you please disconnect your lines. Have a good day, everyone.